Hey, how's it going? It's Intangir here, doing a video today on my train system, Intangir's Vanilla Train Network. And it's been a while. I put some videos out about this in the past, but I've got a lot of new changes since then, and plus the old videos weren't very comprehensive maybe, so I figured I'd do a new video kind of explaining a lot of the features, what it is, and how to use it. So first of all, what is this Intangir's Vanilla Train Network? What it is a train routing system, like a train management system, that it works especially well in grid bases like this, where you don't want to have a bunch of real estate taken up by stackers everywhere. A lot of train bases, you'll see stackers sitting next to every stop. There'll be just row after row of them. You don't need any of that with this system. You have a centralized depots like this one right here. This is one of the depots where you can see all these lanes. The trains are sitting here when they don't have anything to do. And there's a computer here which carefully manages when the trains are released based on signals from the network. So as supply and demand signals are received, the trains will go out and pick up product or deliver it. And while they're not busy, they'll just sit here in the station, they'll get refueled, and they'll wait until they're needed. And you can actually have more than one depot throughout your network. I've got another one somewhere. It's been a while since I've played this save. But yeah, here we go. Here's another one. And they basically all share the responsibility, and if one of the trains winds up over here and it's needed on the other side of the base, the signal will go through the whole network. It'll find a train, it'll set it loose, and it will go do what it needs to do. And yeah, so that's pretty much what it does in general. And some of the features of this that are so handy, in my opinion, are, as I've already mentioned, you don't need stackers. That's a huge space saver, not needing stackers, especially on a grid base like this, where you would end up taking up a large percentage of each one of these blocks just with stackers trying to get to a station. So with this system as it is, I can put all the stations around the edge of a block like this. You see, these are all my stations. And I don't need to have stackers. None of the trains sit in the road and block up the lanes over here. So they all just go to the stop when they're needed, and no other trains are running around the network congesting anything. Another helpful benefit of this: you don't need any mods. It's not a mod. It's a blueprint. It's a set of blueprints for using this. There's no mods involved. It can work with mods. You can easily use it with a whole lot of modded Factorio saves. You can even add new commodities for it to deliver into the computer. I'll explain that later. So yeah, it's very easy to use with the blueprints. It's really easy to set up new stations. You just have to plop down a station from the blueprint and configure a few things. I'll show you how to do that. And it supports multiple trains per resource. You can have like several different iron trains, for example, running back and forth, and it will still control them and only release the trains from the depots when there's actually a place for them to go, so you don't have any congestion. And in many situations, this system will be faster than other train networks because if you have multiple trains running out and grabbing supply and they've come back and they're sitting here waiting in the depot nearby where they need to deliver, they can get right to the place where the supply is needed shorter, from instead of going from like way out to wherever it picks it up from. And the only way you can beat it is if you have stackers, but again, I don't want to have stackers, so this basically is faster than most systems that come up with alternatives to stackers. Okay, here we are in a nice little train block sandbox setup area, so we can learn how to set this thing up, how to make use of it, which things you need to configure. And the first thing you need to do is have a set of train blueprints that carry your red and green wires throughout your network. And that's what I'm going to be using here. You can use any train network or rail setup you want. I mean, not train network, but set of rails, your rail blueprints. You can use any of them you want, but you do need to make sure that they carry the red and green wires throughout your whole area. And this is one I set up for my train blocks. I've got a train block size of a particular size. It's got like 4 quarters per block, and it works well for me. You can use any setup you want. Just make sure that it carries red and green wires throughout. And I'll run around and set this up real quick. Alright, so we've got our rail set up with our green and red wires running throughout our, base. And one of the first things you're going to want to do is set up the area where your trains will park. That's the depot. This is the smart depot. This is the heart of the whole thing. And so let's go ahead and set up an area for that. And I've got a little rail blueprint here for depot access. It just kind of turns into one of these blocks, and I use an area like so for the depot. Now the first and the most important part of the depot that you'll get to is the computer. Now this is the computer right here. It needs a little bit of space. It's not too big, but there are quite a few combinators there, so they got to sit somewhere. Plop that down right there. Now the blueprint has one of these big electric power poles in a spot that you might not really like, and you might want to move it. If you do move it, be careful to make sure you hook up these same wires. You need a green wire and you need a red wire, and these need to come from the network, and they need to hit those same two spots. So if you do move it, just make sure that you include those. And I'll go ahead and move this one here. And let me run these green wires. So this is going to my new pole. Where is it? It's not really lighting up for me, is it? Oh, it is. Okay, they're overlapping, so it's confusing. But yeah, hook up the green and hook up the red. And those are both hooked up, so I can take the old one out. But now you see these aren't actually hooked up to the rest of the network, so I'm going to run those over to the rest of the network as well. And that is not the rest of the network because I replaced that one too. So let me go ahead and run yet more wires real quick here. Got to make sure you tie it into your whole network. That's very important. And that goes for all the stations too. We'll get into that later. All right, there we go. So we've got our computer wired in. It doesn't look too ugly. And this is it. This is the computer. This is the heart of the machine. And there's a couple of important pieces here. I'm not going to get into all of them, but there's some memory cells for supply and demand. There's a counter that goes through and evaluates each resource one by one over the course of about 2 seconds or so. And then there's a list of all the commodities that are handled by it. So you're going to want to make sure that anything that you're transporting on the train system is already in here. If it's not, you need to add it. Most of the common things that you use in vanilla, they're already all on here. But if you want to work with materials that are part of a mod or something, you'll need to add it. So either add a new entry where there's spaces here, and only go evens, by the way. So like 110, 112, 114, 116, 118. You'll add them in like that. And you can replace some of the vanilla ones if there's not enough space, or you could just add more combinators and make sure to loop them in tie them in with a I think it's a red wire. Yeah, there's a red wire there. So if you're working with mods, this is easily able to be used. You just have to do a little bit of extra setup to make sure you add the material types onto this list and go evens. And if you go over 180, you do need to increase the timer on the clock here also. So if you go past, like I'm going up to 130, if you go to 180, you need to add more values onto your counter, a higher value onto your counter, or it won't evaluate them. So for most people doing vanilla, you won't need to set up any of this at all. The counter's fine. Most of the commodities, the common ones, are already on here. But if you start doing like weird things, like transporting materials that normally you wouldn't transport, like provider chests or I don't know, a RoboPort, then you will want to add it onto the list there. All right, so that's it for the computer for now. We'll talk about some more advanced topics to do with the computer later. The next thing you'd need in your depot, though, is you need to have some lanes for all of your trains. And I have part of a lane blueprint here in the blueprint set. And you're going to want to line this up where that pole that's on the top part of it lines up with the middle of the computer, that middle computer pole. And lay it down. And I'm going to put a few of these down. You need one of these for every train in your network. Somewhere they have to park. So it doesn't have to be at the same depot. You can have more than one, but you need space for every train on your network. So make sure you keep that in mind. And let's go ahead and run some of this. And do it on this side as well. Oops. Alright, there we go. We got a nice little depot. Plenty of room for plenty of trains. And we've got our computer set up. So we're ready to have trains start getting around and have somewhere for them to go. Next thing we need is something for them to actually do, which is go back and forth between our supply and demand stations. Let's go ahead and set up a supply station. And that's also in the blueprints here. We'll get one right here. And I'm going to put it off. Actually, let me set up some stops. So I have part of my blueprint here. I've got some stops that we can add. And I'm going to put one over here. So this just lays down the rail. Now we need the actual IVTN infrastructure for this stop. So I'm going to line that up over here and plop it right there. Now this will be a supply station, and I've changed the wires since earlier versions. So if you are upgrading, be careful. The green supplies always use green wires now, just to make it clear at a glance that it's a supply station. You can also see SU here if you have Alt on. But if you're upgrading on top of existing stations, make sure you don't double up your wires. But if you're starting fresh, you shouldn't run into any problems like that. So we pop down the station. There's a few things that you got to change on a new station. You need to go into this right here. This is the one that signals onto the network when there's demand, and you need to make sure you change the supply signal that it's going to signal. We don't want it to signal fish for everything. We want it to signal the actual commodity. In this case, I'm going to put some rocket fuel here. And you also need to go onto the station itself and change the name. So I've got a fish train here, or a fish station. I need to change this, and I'm going to put that to the rocket fuel also. Now the rocket fuel is an odd example to start with because, but I need it because I want to have some fuel over here at the depot, and I figured I might as well just transport it over there and make a stop. But normally these supply settings are configured for the amount of supply that's on a train that's carrying stacks that stack up to 100, and these only stack up to 10. So we should be able to just divide these by 10. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So that's what these numbers represent, the amount of a train load, and I've got it split up into 2 cars. That's not necessarily just for the cars, but it's for the convenience of if you're transporting stacks of items that stack up to 50, you can just click one of these out and you know, just cancel it out and not actually bother with changing the actual value. So but yeah, I'm going to leave that for like that. And this station is more or less ready to go, except for we don't have anything for it to actually supply. So let me go ahead and copy one of these over, and we'll put some rocket fuel over here. Put that over there. All right. Oops. All right, now we've got an actual supply over here in our supply station. So check this out. So here is our rail signal, and I can't tell from this angle if it's on or not yet because well, it's on now. You can actually look here and see it says that a train load is about 800 of these, and we have 38,000. Well, we have 3,800. I mean, so we've got more than enough. So the signal is going onto the network there. The output signal you can see on the right side there is going onto the network saying we have rocket fuel available, and it goes all the way onto the network. And over here at the station, I mean over here at the depot on the computer, the signal's getting all the way over here, and it's going into this demand memory cell here. And we can see now that the station knows that we have not demand. This is the supply side. We have a signal showing here that we have rocket fuel. So right now you'll see occasionally signals will go out on the line there. It goes so fast you probably can't see it, but it's signaling to trains that are parked here. If you are available to pick up this rocket fuel, go and get it. And we don't have any trains yet though, so let's go ahead and put a train out here. I'm just going to let me set up another set of lanes. Somewhere to mess with the trains. No, you can do it anywhere, but just don't do it right in the middle of your throughway, or else we'll be blocking traffic. But I'm going to do it over here. We'll start with this train schedule because it's got some important pieces. It's got this train schedule. That's why I have a blueprint for a single train. It's got this schedule in here. And what you're going to want to do is go through and change your commodities to match what it's going to be actually running for. So change those to rocket fuel, and you need to change the stops that it's going after also. And so far we don't have a demand station for it, so I'm just going to put the supply one here, copy the same conditions that already exist, and then take the original one out. So we'll do the demand side later because we don't have one. Alright, so now we have a train. Let's give it some fuel because I'm plopping it down in the middle of the tracks here. Let's get some carts on it. Alright, now we have a train. It should be ready to roll. I'm going to set it to automatic. First thing it'll do is it'll go over to the station, the depot, and it will wait until there's something to do. And there should already be something to do because it's already signaling that we have a pickup available. So it runs out, it goes and picks it up, just like it's supposed to do. And it loads up. It should load up to, what was it again? 800, yeah, so I set that right. Okay, and then it goes back to the station and waits until there's something to do. Exactly as it's supposed to do. That's how it's supposed to work. So that's all really cool. And, all right, so now it's got nothing to do because it's waiting to go out on a supply run, and it's waiting for this signal on delivery to a demand station. And there's no demand station yet, so we're going to put one up. First we'll add some more stops here. I'm going to put them right next to the depot so I can use it for fueling the depot. Okay. Now I go back into here and I pick my demand station. Now the demand station, I just added a new feature to it. That's part of the reason I'm doing a new video. Is the demand stations now can do priority signaling. They can signal priority to the network so that other stations of the same type will get deliveries before them if they have more on hand. So as the station gets up to a quarter of its supply, it signals less and less priority to this station. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing where I just divide by 10 on this. Now this value here, it's a bit of a magic number. I've got it, the pre-configured value is for 100 stacks again, 2 cars, 100 stacks. So if you're doing 2 cars of 50 stacks, you can just dump one of these out. If you're doing anything else, you can calculate the number by looking in the blueprint real quick. It's got the formula that you need to use. It's basically the station's maximum capacity minus the train's capacity divided by 4. So it's basically the capacity of however many chests you have. If you add more chests, you can use a different number. and if you have a different stack size or whatever. But basically it's pre-configured for 2 cars of stacks of items that stack up to 100. So if you're working with something like sulfur, which stacks up to 50, then the easy thing is just to delete one of these. Or if you're working with jet fuel, you can just divide these by 10, which is what I've just done. So that is how that works. And the reason why it's by 4 is because each time a quarter of the demand is met, it will kind of penalize the route so that other things will get deliveries while this one still has stock on hand. That's one of the new features. It's especially helpful for situations where you don't have enough supply, you don't have fully saturated supply trains, or you just don't have enough trains, or you're still building up. Your factory will run a lot smoother in the meantime while supplies are tighter. It won't totally fill up one station to the absolute brim when it doesn't actually need it all yet, like it's not actually working through it that quickly. It'll instead go and supply another station, and they'll kind of evenly supply out. So the stations that are using less, they'll get hit less instead of just filling up the closest ones the way it would otherwise. So that's one of the new features. It's really cool, and it's in this version of the blueprint. So it's on the demand side. So just like the supply station, you have to set up a couple of things on your new station. You need to change this to the commodity type, and you need to change the station itself, the name of it. So we're going to go over here, delete that fish, add the rocket fuel. Alright, now we've got a demand station. And actually, since that was the only fish station when I first plopped it down and I renamed it, it updated it on the train itself. You can keep that in mind. If you just set up one station at a time and you rename the stations and it's the only one, then any trains that already had that on their schedule will automatically update for you, and you don't have to go through and manually change the station names on the train, which is a little bit of a time saver, but you have to do the order correctly. Anyway, so that we did do the order correctly on that one, so now it's updated. It's ready to go and bring supply to a demanding station, but this station is not all hooked up yet, so it's not actually getting that demand signal onto the line. It is ready, and it's signaling that it wants some rocket fuel, but I got to actually hook that up. So that's the last thing. Hook it up, and then any second, immediately afterward, the train makes its way and brings over the supplies and goes and puts them in here. There it goes, just like that. And then it's off again. It'll go back to the station and wait until there's some supplies available. They always make the round trip back to the depot. That's just how it is. If you want to have quicker turnaround time, you can have more than one train. And so there'll be a second train already waiting here, and they'll just kind of switch places back and forth. But in a situation like this, you usually, well, a lot of situations you don't need multiple trains, you don't need them to be super prompt. So, but yeah, it's working now. It's doing everything it's supposed to do. It's delivering the fuel back and forth, and that is how it works. It's pretty cool, and I always still get a nice little kick every time after I hook a new station onto the network, and then the train rolls on in. It's a really cool feeling just to know that all the gears are turning and it's doing what it's supposed to do, and you just got to hook it up and they just come right on over. It's a lot of it's very satisfying. Okay, so that covers the demand section. I mean the demand stations, and we've set up a train. Also in the blueprints here, I have a similar type of station for fluid supply and demand. Now, as you can see, none of these stations are perfectly optimal, and so what I recommend if you're doing your own base, your own factory, is that you take these blueprints and use them as like a starting point, and then customize all your own changes that you want, like more chests or better unloading or better storage, or however you want to do it. Add power poles, add your touches that you want, and then save a version of that and use that for your needs, and just basically use this as a starting template. Because yeah, I've got it I've got a relatively, I mean, it's a good enough amount of loading and unloading chests, but you could go 6. You could add all sorts of things downstream from there to your liking, and I recommend that. But yeah, for fluid, I have it's not a perfectly optimal, but it's not terrible setup for getting fluids on and off trains. They're included in this version of the blueprints. Now, also, I just didn't used to have those, so every time I would start with one of these, and then I'd customize it to the fluids, and sometimes I'd miss a thing or mess a thing up. So now I've just included the blueprints to make it a little easier. There's also a couple of old things in here. I don't recommend using the skip stop. It has a very limited use case scenario where you're basically going out on long supply runs and you want to skip the depot on the way back. And it has been a while since I've actually used this, and might have switched the wires. I don't even know if it for sure works. So use at your own risk. Make sure it's doing what you want it to do if you're going to use it. But I don't recommend it. But it has a very limited scenario where it's actually helpful. And when it is helpful, it's kind of helpful. So it's something you could add. I also have a wider layout of these depot lanes. If you're going to use the wide version depots, instead of lining up with the middle pole, you line up with this forward pole. And you can't use these interchangeably. You can't use narrow and wide together. So if you're going to have a depot with all wide, with wide, they have to be all wide. But then that will give you more space in between lanes to, you could have liquid storage, or you could have a variety of things in between on the wider versions. But yeah, I don't use those. And it's not that I don't recommend them. For certain scenarios, you might want them. They could be helpful. So I've put them in the blueprint as optional. So that's where those are. And I also have the old version of the demand station. It's more simpler. It doesn't do priority signaling. So basically, if you use it interchangeably with the stations that are doing priority signaling, they'll always get top priority until they're completely full. So you can use them and they'll work perfectly fine, but they'll just be more demanding than the priority sharing demand stations. So keep that in mind. That's pretty much all you need to know about using the Intangir Vanilla Train Network. I think I'm going to do another video to talk about some common problems that people have. It's pretty much always a setup issue where they've not connected something to the network, but the station is still powered, so it'll still get deliveries. Yeah, for example, earlier when I set up this new stop on the train, on the tracks here, and I hadn't hooked it up yet, if there was another station that was also signaling demand, then this train could be let off out of the depot, and it would come here even though this one wasn't hooked up. It wasn't signaling the network properly. That is the cause of pretty much 100% of all of the issues I've seen people have with the train network system, is that they have a station somewhere on their network that's not connected, so it's not signaling to the network, and so the train depot computer gets out of sync with the demand and what's actually been met. So keep that in mind. That's pretty much the only thing you really need to know. But I'll do another video to talk about some of the more obscure issues that could possibly come up and almost never do, but occasionally could. That'll be separate. But that pretty much covers everything you really need to know for normal common use of the Intangir Vanilla Train Network. I hope this was helpful to everybody. I hope there's people out there still actually using this. There's thousands of views on some of these videos, but there's only not a whole lot of favorites on the Factorio Blueprints website, and there's not a whole lot of people talking about it, and I don't really see it show up in any Megabase designs or anything. So it's a great system. It's worked great for me. I've used it for thousands of hours, and I know several other people who have also used it for hundreds or thousands of hours, but I think it's still relatively snuck under the radar this whole time. I've seen far more simplistic and far less capable blueprints and even mods get a lot more attention than this system has gotten, and it's been out for almost 4 years now. So anyway, here's a new video showing everybody how to use it. Hopefully they'll introduce new people to it and remind other people that it still exists, and it's still very powerful, and it's still very useful on Factorio, and I'm still using it whenever I play, and it's a great system, and I hope you enjoy it too. That's it for now. Have a good one. See ya.